This is a small but intimate crowd. Feel free to come closer if you want to. I don't bite hard. Thanks a lot for coming out, spending a chilly Friday evening with me, with us here in Vienna. Thank you to Quintessenz. Thank you to Daniel for organizing this and putting this on, and everybody who had a hand in this. It's nice to be here and share my work with new people. So, my name is Cyrus Farivar. I am an Iranian-American journalist. I was born and raised in California, but I now live in Germany, and I apologize for the fact that it's a credit to you, really, that you all speak English well enough so that I don't have to speak German, but I probably should. I am trying to learn, but one day I'll maybe be able to come back and do another talk in German, so hopefully. In any case, I've written this book, The Internet of Elsewhere. They're for sale later on. They're 20 euros if you're so interested. The introduction to the book is available free online as a PDF. It's about 15 pages, I think. If you go to internetofelsewhere.com, you can take cards if you want to. So this book is about the history and effects of the internet in 4 different countries around the world. I cover Estonia, Senegal, South Korea, and Iran. And the first question that people ask me when I tell them about the book is, why did you pick these countries? They're completely different. They're in different parts of the world. How are they connected in any way? And my answer to that is, you're right, they're not connected in any obvious way. And that's kind of the point. I wanted to choose countries that are not only different geographically, different culturally, different historically, but I'm a technology journalist. I'm interested in technology. I'm interested in the internet. I spend way too much time on the internet, as probably most of you do too. And these countries are also different when it comes to the internet, to levels of internet access. So probably most of you who read about these kinds of things, you've probably come across this phrase, internet penetration. There's probably a better German word for it than that. What do you say in German for internet penetration, or do you?
Internet durchdringung.
All right, close enough. Anyway, so of course, what that means is internet penetration means the number of people on the internet in a given place divided by the number of people that live there. And in most of Western Europe, I haven't checked for Austria, maybe some of you know, I would guess that the internet penetration rate is probably in the 80-85% range, something like that, right? A substantial portion of Austrians are on the internet. Same in Germany, same in the UK and France and most of Western Europe, in the US as well. And so if you were to kind of line up all the countries in the world and rank them by internet penetration, you would have South Korea on one side, right? South Korea is the world's most wired country. It has the world's fastest, cheapest, and most widespread internet of anywhere in the world. And the obvious question is, why? Why is it not Austria? Why is it not the US? Why is it not Japan, right? Why is it South Korea? What happened that created this situation to the point where not only do you have really fast and cheap Wi-Fi, but you have other things that have kind of come out of that. You have a really interesting video gaming culture. I don't know how many of you are gamers, but in South Korea, and I write about this a little bit in the book, there is a professional video game culture and league. It's called the Esports League, and there are these mostly young men, teenage young men in their 16 to 19, 20 years old, that play StarCraft professionally, for money, right? They make tens of thousands of euros, in some cases hundreds of thousands of euros, paid for by Korean companies that you've heard of, LG, Samsung, big companies, that pay for them to play. That's all they do, is play StarCraft. That's it. It's like a esports, right? And that's really amazing, that this country is so kind of into that. There are television channels devoted to watching StarCraft, so you can go online, you can watch YouTube. I'm sure people have done German subtitles for the Korean commentary, like in football, there's like people that give commentary. It's amazing. And so again, the question is, how did we get to this point? So that's Korea. Then if we move a little bit further down the spectrum, again, moving more into Europe, we get to Estonia. Has anyone here traveled to Estonia? One person. All right, awesome. I love it. How many of you use Skype? Okay, half the people. Usually more hands go up, but okay. Skype, as some of you might know, is actually from Estonia. Skype was created by Estonian programmers in Estonia, and their headquarters to this day, even though they got bought by Microsoft for billions of euros, is still in Estonia, right? It was founded, the two founders are a Dane and a Swede, a guy called Janus Friis and Nicholas Zenström, and they previously had created Kazaa. If some of you probably used Kazaa back in the day. The same guys, right? And so they wanted to take the concept of Kazaa, and they wanted to they wanted to take what Kazaa did for the music industry, but do that same thing for telecom, for telephony, right? And so they went to Estonia, they found some cheap, smart, young programmers in Estonia, and they created Skype, and it's still there and it's still going. And it turns out that Estonia is this kind of corner of Europe up there in the northern part of Europe next to Russia and Finland that most people in this part of Europe have barely heard about or know where it is or have been there. But it's really, really interesting, especially for technology. And, you know, a lot of my friends say that I'm kind of obsessed with Estonia. I could talk for hours about Estonia, just Estonia, right? I went to Estonia I would encourage you all to go. It's not very far. It's a lot closer than when I used to live in California. So you go get on a plane, go to Estonia. It's awesome. I recommend it. Anyway, I first heard about Estonia in 2005. I read an article in an American newspaper called the Christian Science Monitor, and it said that Estonia had declared internet access as a human right. And I thought, what? What does that even mean? How does that work? What does that look like? And also, where's Estonia? What is this place? Like, what? And you know, like, and so I started doing a little bit more reading, and you know, I discovered that yeah, it's this country up there in the northern part of Europe. We were talking a moment about Kosovo, and you know, Kosovo has what is it, 1.8 million people? I think you said. Estonia is even smaller. It's 1.3 million people. What's the population of Vienna?
2 million.
2 million. Okay, so like it's almost 2 Estonias is Vienna, right? So that's really small. And they built Skype, and they also did all of these other cool tech projects, right? They're the first country in the world to have internet voting. They have a digital ID card system that allows you to not only vote, but also to pay your taxes online, to access health records online, to sign digital contracts online, all kinds of things. They blanketed the country in internet access in the late 1990s. They decided that all schools should have internet access in the late 1990s. This is a very ambitious project for a country that had not even been independent for not even 10 years by the late 90s. And one of my favorite things is that there's free Wi-Fi everywhere. It's amazing. Like, you go there and you go to the airport, free Wi-Fi. You go to the port, you want to take a ferry to Finland, free Wi-Fi. You want to take a train to Russia, free Wi-Fi. You want to take a bus to Latvia, free Wi-Fi. You want to go to a hotel in the forest in the middle of freaking nowhere, there's free Wi-Fi. Like, everywhere you go, it's amazing. And like, you know, here, I haven't spent a lot of time in Austria yet. I hope to more, but at least where I live in Germany, you can tell me if this is the same here. But in Germany, you know, you go to Frankfurt Airport, or you go to the Bonn train station, or you go to Berlin, whatever, and you open up your laptop, and then you see, oh, Deutsche Telekom wants you to pay €5 for an hour. You're just like, oh, shit, forget it. Like, you know, and like, I hate that. Like, I think that that's such a ripoff. And I told my Estonian friends, I said, look, you want people to know about Estonia, you want people to come to Estonia, here's what you do. You sponsor free Wi-Fi everywhere else in the world. Imagine you fly into Frankfurt Airport and you open up your laptop and it says, hey, here's T-Mobile, €5 for 1 hour, or free Wi-Fi brought to you by the Republic of Estonia. So hopefully they'll take up that idea. I think that would be very cool. But again, the question here is why? Why is Estonia, this tiny little country that has gone through all kinds of problems, that has been occupied by the Soviet Union and has this tiny population and has been through wars and all of this kind of stuff, why did they create Skype, right? Why was Skype not created in Silicon Valley or in Austria or in Japan or in Brazil or anywhere else, right? Why did it happen there? And and these are the kinds of questions that I'm trying to understand. In the case of Estonia, the reason why Wi-Fi I think is free now and has spread all over the place is because of the efforts of a guy called Veljo Hammer. He's this 45-year-old Estonian guy, and I've become friends with him, and I profile him in the book. And he is somebody who he just happened to be the first person to go around and tell people about Wi-Fi. Like he would, in the US, there's a story that maybe some of you have heard of called, there's this story of a guy called Johnny Appleseed, right? And he's this kind of mythical figure, and he traveled around the US, supposedly, and planted apple seeds to grow apple trees all over the country, and that's why we have apple trees in the US, right? This is the story. Veljo is basically the Johnny Appleseed of Wi-Fi in Estonia. So he would go to cafes, go to hotels, go to supermarkets, hospitals, and he would be like, hey, have you heard of Wi-Fi? No? Let me tell you about it. And here's why you should have it, and it should be free and awesome. And so that's what it is. That's kind of the standard. He was like the first person to get in there, and so that's what it is. And so I kind of talk about his story in the book. Okay, I could talk about Estonia forever. You really should go. Moving on to Iran. As I said, we're moving on this spectrum of internet connectivity countries. And if most of Europe is in this kind of 80% range, if we move a little bit down, we'll get to Iran. Iran is a country that has a lot of importance to me personally. My father is from Iran. I have family in Iran. I've only been to Iran actually once. That was in 2008. But anyway, Iran is an interesting country with respect to the internet because, first of all, it has the second highest level of internet penetration in the Middle East by percentage. It is about 35%. So that means 1 out of every 3 Iranians, out of 80 million Iranians, 1 out of every 3 is on the internet. So that's pretty high, actually, for the region. The only country in the Middle East that has a higher percentage is Israel. Israel has a much higher percentage than Iran does. But Iran is higher than Turkey, higher than Egypt, higher than Jordan, higher than all the other countries in the region. So that's kind of interesting. Another thing that is happening in Iran is a very young country. Iran has 70% of its population is under the age of 30. And this is what's often called the kind of children of the revolution generation. So if I were born in Iran, that would be me, right? That would be people born after the 1979 revolution. So Iran is a wired country, it's a young country, and it's also a very educated country. Iran has a very high percentage of people who attend university. I believe it's literacy alone is well over 80%, so the vast majority of Iranians can read and write in their own language. And I think it's something like half of the population goes to university. And what's interesting also is that in Iran universities, there are in fact more women than men, which you might not expect. So Iran is a young, wired, and educated country. And that's a really interesting combination, right? Because as a result, you have lots of people who want to do stuff on the internet, right? They want to do what we all do. They want to talk to their friends, they want to read news, they want to watch football games, whatever, all the things that we all do. But for better or worse, they live in a country where that's not always possible to do, right? Where the internet is very, very restricted, where websites get shut down on and off all the time, and things like that. And so what's happened is the internet rose in Iran in terms of the number of people that were using it, rose primarily in the late 1990s and early 2000s period. And that happened to be at an interesting time politically in Iran as well. So right now, you guys have probably all seen Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the current president of Iran, doing what he does. He became president in 2005. Before him, there was another guy called Mohammad Khatami, who was considered by Iranian standards as a kind of political moderate. But one of the things that he did was he kind of opened up the society a little bit. He allowed organizations to be formed, nonprofits, civil society. He allowed this to expand a little bit. Newspapers to open up a little bit. But as he was doing that, more and more people were using the internet, and there was also pressure from political conservatives within Iran to say, no, we don't want that. We have to shut down this newspaper. We have to shut down this organization. We have to shut down this website. And so what happened is by the kind of 2001, 2002, 2003, as more and more people were coming, as blogging started to kind of come into existence. I don't know if this is still true, but there was a period of time around 2004, 2005, where the Persian language was actually the third most blogged language out of all of the languages in the world where you have blogs. For a while, Persian was the third language, which is kind of surprising. But so what happened is the government kind of came down, and as these web magazines and blogs and people were coming up, the government itself was kind of pushing back. And it did that in a number of different ways. It did that, first of all, by intimidating people, by arresting people, by shutting websites down, things like that. But also, over time, using the medium of the internet for its own purposes, right? So President Ahmadinejad now has a blog, and you can read it in 4 languages. You can read it in English, French, Arabic, or Persian. Take your pick. More recently, the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, has a Twitter feed. You can read him in English or in Persian. Take your pick. It's very entertaining. And this is something that I like to talk about and remind people of with respect to Iran, is that probably some of you have maybe heard this phrase, Twitter revolution in Iran. That's not a phrase that I particularly like. I don't think it's very accurate. For the main reason that Iran at that time, 2009, when there was the presidential elections that you probably followed, Iran did not go through, unfortunately, a real political revolution, unlike what we've seen more recently in other parts of North Africa and the Middle East, Libya, Tunisia, maybe Syria, Egypt, I forgot Egypt. The supreme leader is still the supreme leader, the Islamic Republic is still the Islamic Republic, the president is still the president. Not much has changed, politically speaking. And the Iranian government continues to use these tools for their own purposes, and they continue to shut websites down and arrest people and use kind of the power of the state to suppress speech online. In fact, just recently there was a case of an Iranian-Canadian guy who he was a developer living in Canada who had been arrested. There was another guy who had started kind of the Persian equivalent of LinkedIn, or Zing. I guess you guys use Zing in this part of the world. Or do you pronounce it Zing? Zing? I think it's Zing, right? Anyway, like a job social network professional website. He had started kind of the Persian clone of that. He got arrested, the website got shut down. The Iranian government is not naive when it comes to what's going on online. In fact, if you look, and I talk about this a little bit in the book, the first incident that I've found where the Iranian government responded to something that happened on the internet was actually way back in 2001. And what had happened was there was an Ayatollah, a reformist Ayatollah who had kind of fallen out of favor. His name was Ayatollah Montazeri. And he unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But he was a guy who, when the Islamic Revolution first started, he was kind of right up in there with Khomeini and Khamenei and all these kind of guys that were really the architects of the Islamic Republic. And he fell out of favor with them, particularly during the Iran-Iraq War. He spoke out against some of the atrocities that the Iranian government was committing at that time. And he spent the last, I think it was something like 20 years of his life under house arrest in Iran. And in 2001, he started a website, Montazeri, his name, with an I.com. That was his website. And on his website, he published a 600-page memoir detailing all the bad stuff that he had witnessed and been part of during the Iran-Iraq War, political assassinations, all kinds of really bad things. And he published this on his website. So what did the Iranian government do? They created a website which was Montazeri with a Y.com, right? So they basically tried to like cyber squat him and like fake out people on the internet to fool them into going to the wrong website. It didn't really work. I don't think that many people were actually fooled. But I think that shows that Iran has been well aware of what's going on the internet, particularly in their own language, for over a decade now. Okay, so that's Iran. That leaves me with my final country, Senegal, which is another country that I have a special relationship with. I lived in Senegal as a student for about half a year I guess it's 10 years ago now, in 2002, 2003, I lived in northern Senegal, studying political science. And Senegal is a really interesting country because it is representative, I think, of the developing world and kind of the challenges that many developing countries face with respect to internet access. We've talked a little bit about levels of internet access, penetration, things like that. Senegal, unfortunately, has an internet penetration rate of about 12% out of a population of something like 11 million people. And so that's pretty low. That's not zero, right? That's not the lowest. I would like to say that it's probably one of the, you could say, best least connected countries, if that makes sense. By that I mean countries primarily in sub-Saharan Africa that maybe don't have as much money and are, and face challenges with respect to deploying internet access. Something that I think people forget about a lot with respect to bringing internet to parts of the world that don't have it, or extending internet access to parts of the world that don't have it, is a very simple thing. I talked about the education level in Iran, and I bring that up for a particular reason because in some ways that's kind of the opposite of a place like Senegal, where 40% of the country is literate in a language that, is the colonial language, in French, right? That means 4 out of 10 people can read and write in French. But of course that also means that 6 out of 10 cannot read and write in French or in any other language for that matter. And I think something that we often forget when we talk about the internet is, for all the, kind of YouTube and all the fun kind of visual and audio things, podcasts and the like, that we all know and love and use, the internet as we know it today is primarily a text medium, right? We interact with it by typing stuff and by reading stuff, whether that's in German or English or French or Persian or whatever language you use, it's primarily a text medium. So if you can't read and write, it's really hard to use the internet as a whole. And so I think that's one of the big reasons why Senegal has been slow to getting online, and that's true, I think, for lots of other sub-Saharan African countries as well. There's also, I think, been lots of issues with respect to deregulation of, I think in Austria, I know in Germany, you probably people in this room would know better than I would, but I would presume that at some point within the last 20, 30 years in Austria, Austria Telecom demonopolized, right? And so there used to be one monopoly for the whole country, and then now there's different mobile providers and telephone providers and internet providers. Yes? It's back to monopoly? Okay. Well, we can get into that later, but theoretically, right? There's a competitive market somewhat. And I think the same is true in Germany and in the US and in other countries where you have a little bit of competition going on. In a place like Senegal, you have an incumbent monopoly. There's this company called Sonatel, which is the national telecom of Senegal. And the government said, okay, in 2004, the monopoly is over. We're going to allow other companies to come in and compete with telephone and internet and mobile phone. There was another mobile phone company, but primarily on landlines and internet access. And they said, okay, we're going to allow other companies to come in. It took them 3 years before a second internet provider came into the market, till 2007. And that's still the case to this day. In a country of 11 million people, there's 3 mobile providers and 2 internet providers, basically. So there's not very much competition. So the prices are kept kind of artificially high, in a sense. There's also, of course, a big issue with economics. Of course, the income levels are much, much lower. And you can get broadband internet in Senegal, just like you can get it here. But the problem is that it costs roughly the same thing. It costs, 30, 40 euros a month in that neighborhood. And for people who make significantly less money, that means it costs that much more. So that's another problem. But I think something that's really interesting about what's going on with respect to the internet not just in Senegal, but in other parts of the developing world is that, and this is something that I first started to think about when I met Vint Cerf, who I was lucky enough to have written the foreword to my book. The uber geeks in the room will know that Vint Cerf is one of the founders, the godfathers of the internet. He developed a protocol called TCP/IP. Code helped develop a protocol called TCP/IP, which is basically the thing that makes the internet work. It's the piece of software that allows the internet to function, more or less. And I met him at a conference in Switzerland a few years ago, and he said something really interesting, which was, he said there's an entire generation of people growing up in places like Senegal, in Congo, South Africa, Thailand, Brazil, all over the world, that the first interaction that they have with the internet is and will be on a mobile phone or on a tablet device or on something that is not what I think probably all of us first used the internet on, which was on a screen and a keyboard, right? That was how we all first used the internet. And he said, that will create new and interesting applications that are designed for that type of environment, for that type of interface, right? We're starting to see that already a little bit. In Senegal, there's a service where if you're a fisherman or if you're a farmer, you can send a text message and find out what the price of, a kilo of corn is at the market on, this particular day, right? In East Africa, there's another program service that I would love to use here in Europe, and I don't know why it doesn't exist, where you can exchange prepaid mobile phone credit for cash. So for people who don't have access to banks, right, it allows them to kind of give each other money, to exchange money, to send money across the country or across the world even. And the way it works is, so if I wanted to send Daniel 10 euros, I would send him a text message, he would take his phone and he would go to the kiosk down the road and he would show them the code and they would say, yes, this is a valid code, here's your 10 euros, right? That's it. I wish I could do that with, because I have a prepaid mobile account, I have money on my account. There's been times when I'm out in the world and I want to buy a beer and I have 10 euros on my phone but no euros in my pocket, and then I'm like, shit, I have to go to the ATM and go get money. And if there was a way for me to exchange the money I already have for cash, that would be great, And this is really interesting because it takes that service, it's called M-Pesa. It exists in Kenya and Uganda, I think, for the moment. What's really interesting about it is that this is a service that runs on any phone. You don't need an Android or iPhone or anything fancy to use it. You can use it on your, 10 euro Nokia that you bought in 1998. It works on that just fine. And you also, interestingly, you don't know how to read. You don't need to know how to read in order to use it. You just need to know how to use a phone and to punch numbers. That's it, right? And that's something, and there's a compelling reason for you to use it. If you want to send money to your friend, or if you want to receive money, if you want to pay for stuff, you can pay cab drivers, I've been told, in Kenya using this system. There's a compelling reason for people to use it, right? They want to use it. It makes their life a little bit easier. So I think that's really interesting and kind of exciting, and even though, it might be easy to kind of get a little bit down about how the internet the internet penetration rate is low, the mobile penetration rate is very, very high, right? Many people in sub-Saharan Africa have either own or have access to a mobile phone. And I think that's very interesting. And as the price of smartphones comes down, we've talked, you've probably heard over the last few years about this $100 laptop from the One Laptop Per Child project. It wouldn't surprise me if we get to the $100 smartphone before that, and maybe we already have, I don't know. I don't know all the models of smartphones, but we may already be close to that. And that's pretty interesting, I think, for people in various parts of the world. So I think what I will do is just read a couple little short bits, just so you can get like a little flavor of the book, and then open it up to questions, and you can tell me if you think I'm totally wrong, and throw things at me if you want to, or whatever. And then, does that work? Fine. Cool. All right. So I thought I would start off with just a little sense of, let's see. I talked about, let's go back to Korea, actually. I talked about this gaming environment, and this is something that was really amazing for me to watch. And this is how I actually open up the South Korea section of the book is to talk about that experience of going to one of these professional StarCraft games. This is from the South Korea chapter. Seoul, South Korea, April 16th, 2007. The Yongsan district is a nexus of modern Seoul. It has a high-speed rail stop, a major subway station, the older Yongsan electronics market across the railroad tracks, and its newer cousin inside the station's shopping mall. Here, one can buy anything that plugs into an electric socket. However, the most unique feature of Yongsan is perched on the 7th floor of the expansive iPark Mall, adjacent to the electronics market. There, all by itself, sits the esports stadium. The rooftop patio between the elevator and the entrance to the stadium is cold, plain, and quiet. There are none of the trappings normally associated with the sports stadiums. No vendors, no tailgaters, no rowdy fans. The stadium is actually a room about the size of a recital hall, maybe 2 or 3 times bigger than this room. But instead of music, the stage is devoted to video games, specifically StarCraft. First released in the United States in 1998, this game has faded from view in the decades since its release. While most kids in other parts of the world have moved on to newer games like Counter-Strike or World of Warcraft, in South Korea, StarCraft reigns supreme. Although StarCraft 2 was not released until mid-2010, it was formally announced at an event in Seoul in 2007. At the esports stadium, professional matches for a 12-league team take place, complete with coaches, uniforms, referees, stage lights, theme music, smoke machines, TV crews, and play-by-play announcers. On this day, around 60 spectators are gathered to watch their favorite sport. The majority of Korea's adults do not understand the appeal of these games, nor do they understand why their children sometimes spend hours upon hours enraptured in this fantasy world. The crowd on this particular day consists mostly of groups of high school girls sitting together and hiding their faces behind banners that they've brought so they can cheer on their favorite players without being caught by TV cameras. There are no concessions, no t-shirts, just these homemade signs. This match is pure sport and no marketing. Like every Pro League match since its founding in 2002, this match is broadcast live throughout the country. 2 TV channels carry StarCraft 24 hours a day, with the larger one on GameNet reaching 3 to 4 million viewers during the 6 to 10 p.m. primetime slot. If adjusted for population, the network's StarCraft broadcast would consistently top the weekly TV ratings in the United States. Most of the girls in the audience are supposed to be in school or at an after-school learning academy, or should at least be studying on a weekday afternoon and definitely not sneaking out to watch competitive video games. As the lights dim and the smoke machines glaze the room with its translucent haze for dramatic effect, each team of 7 players walk out onto their respective sides of the stage. One of the teams, Istro, wears black and white tracksuits with orange accents and a large Istro logo, written in English, on the left breast and shoulders with a lightning bolt replacing the S. After a round of applause, cheers, and thumping techno music, the players calmly sit at a long counter. Despite the incessant bass and stagecraft, the players don't appear to be excited. Not much more than a few smiles flash across the faces of the young men as they take their seats. There's no high-fiving, no trash talking. It's all discipline, as if they were about to perform a work of classical music. As they enter the room, they proceed to sit quietly, 7 in a row. The team's coach, Daniel Lee, anchors the team at one side. He's the only one not wearing a uniform, opting instead for a suit. Waiting for the starting 7 at the counter is a box of donuts and a small bottle of orange juice at each chair. They're about to engage their opponent, CJ Entus. The play-by-play announcers, 2 male, 1 female, call up Istro's first player, Kim Won-ki. He rises from the counter, clutching his own keyboard and mouse, and he climbs a set of stairs, entering the gaming pod. It resembles a flimsy amusement park ride with an angled windshield and a large plexiglass windows on the side. At the same time, CJ Entus' player does the same, stepping into his own gaming pod on the opposite side of the stage. Inside each pod are 2 PCs and bulky monitors that take up nearly half of the desk. The pod is set up for one purpose and one purpose only, to play StarCraft. Kim arranges his keyboard and mouse, and his opponent does the same on the opposite side. Each player pops in earbuds to listen to the game's sound effects, and then covers his ears with a set of ear mufflers to mask the sounds of the crowd and the play-by-play reports, despite the fact that their pod is nearly soundproof. While the two opponents settle in and prepare to destroy each other with nothing more than mouse clicks and keystrokes, the zebra-striped referees stand patiently behind each competitor, and a turquoise neon light glows beneath each pod. The crowd is surprisingly polite and quiet for a nationally televised sporting event. There are no chants, there's no clapping in anticipation of the match that is about to begin. The trio of announcers sit on stage between the two pods, facing the crowd. Projected on a large screen above the announcers is the action of the game itself. The opening screen allows the players to configure the game and choose their race: Terran, Zergling, Protoss, and finally, this round's map. In most developed countries, console games like the Nintendo Wii or the Xbox 360 have tended to dominate over classic computer games played on a PC. In the United States alone, the console gaming industry is worth over $3 billion. This is not the case in Korea, mainly because Japanese-made consoles by Nintendo and Sega could not be sold in Korea. During the Japanese occupation of the Korean Peninsula from 1905 until from 1905 until 1945, use of the Korean language was highly restricted, and Japanese language media dominated the country. The Japanese imperial government made a concerted effort to supplant the native Korean culture with its own through the use of linguistic and cultural repression, and much more direct and harsher moves, such as the forced recruitment of Korean women to become prostitutes for Japanese imperial forces. As a way to counteract this historical imbalance between Korean and Japanese media, South Korea passed several laws after gaining its independence that restricted Japanese media and consumer products. As a result, the console gaming boom born out of Japanese video games companies like Nintendo and Sega in the mid-1980s and early 1990s did not exist in Korea. One could obtain a black market Nintendo in Korea in the 1980s, but its products were not available on a mass scale. Korea did not lift its ban on Japanese products until 1998. Consequently, the only video games that were available for a long time were PC games. As a result, in families that had computers, ostensibly for educational purposes, younger Koreans became more and more familiar with using PCs and the games that came along with them. StarCraft is known as a real-time strategy game in which players must collect resources, build military units, and seek out their opponent in the game's online map. And as players explore the map and discover more resources, he or she will eventually discover the opponent's base, and then it's simply a race to see which side can overwhelm the other with his or her respective army. At a decent amateur level, games typically last 30 to 60 minutes. But here, an entire one-on-one professional match lasts less than 15. No one is sure why exactly StarCraft continues to be so popular in Korea, although there are a number of theories. Some StarCraft watchers, like Daniel Lee, the then coach of the eStro team, suggest that the game itself is near perfect, as it is imbued with a profound, complex logic, like chess. He also points out that the game really speaks to the Korean idea of taeguk, known also as yin-yang, which is symbolized in the blue and red swirl on the South Korean flag. Quote, another reason as to why StarCraft is so popular is because of the three races, Protoss, Terran, and Zergling. They're so well balanced, one race doesn't have a great advantage over the other. Other Korean scholars have compared the game to capitalism itself. Quote, the principle of maximum profits from minimum capital and labor is perfectly realized in StarCraft. Just as capitalism turns out to be the most suitable regime in history so far, real-time strategy games like StarCraft dominate the game market, writes Pak Sang-yu of Yonsei University in his 2005 Korean book, When Games Talk to You. StarCraft has even gotten the attention of the country's military. In 2006, one of the Pro League's top players, Lim Hyo-hwan, better known as Slayer Boxer, had to serve his required 27 months in the military, as all young South Korean men are required to do. Lim had been a professional gamer since 1999, starting at the age of 19. However, once he was drafted into the Korean Air Force, the top brass sponsored the creation of the Pro League's 12th team as a way to recruit for their military division, and possibly to get some computer-savvy military minds into their ranks. CJ Entus and eStro sit between the pods and the audience at their respective clear plastic top counters. Under the counter, the computer screens project the current match, allowing the teammates to monitor the evolution of the game as they study it intently for possible tactics and strategies. As the lights dim and the music fades, a young woman's voice pierces the din in accented English. 1, 2, 3, Entus fighting, responds the cacophony of mostly high-pitched female voices. And not more than a second later, another voice pipes up from the other side of the room. 1, 2, 3, Estro fighting, bellows the response. And with that, the StarCraft match begins. Game on, Korea. So that gives you a little bit of a feeling of what that experience is like. One of my favorite things that also happened to me when I was in Korea was the experience of, I talked about what a wired country it is earlier. When I was writing this book, most of the time I was living in California, in a city called Oakland, which is near Berkeley, near San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California. I see people nodding their heads. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. So in the Bay Area, we have a subway system, an U-Bahn system called the BART, right? And it takes people from Oakland and Berkeley to San Francisco. And one of the things that it does, due to the geography of the Bay Area, is it goes under the bay, right? It's like a much smaller version of like the channel in UK and France. Anyway, so when you go under the bay, under the San Francisco Bay, from Oakland to San Francisco, it takes about 8 minutes, 9 minutes. And when I was writing this book in 2008, 2009, 2010, when you are under that tunnel, there's no mobile phone service at all. There's no Wi-Fi, no internet, you can't even send a text message, like nothing at all, totally no communication at all. And when I arrived in Korea, the moment I arrived in Seoul, I got on a subway, and the subway system in Seoul is, I think like many subway systems, it's far, far underground, and you have these fast-moving trains, and I walk on the train, and I got on the train, and the very first thing I saw was a guy standing there on the subway, on his way home from work probably, with his mobile phone, watching a live baseball game on a moving subway. 300 meters underground, moving 50, kilometers per hour or something. I was completely blown away. I was like, I live in, this like supposed technological hub of everything. We've got Apple and Twitter and Facebook and all these things and Google, whatever. We can't even send a text message on our subway system, and these guys are watching freaking live baseball on their subway. What is wrong with this? So I haven't tested. I did notice that you can get cell service in the U-Bahn here in Vienna, so that's good. I don't know if you can watch live baseball. Probably not baseball, but maybe football or something. But I don't know if you can watch live TV on the subway. I don't know if the connection is good enough. But anyway. Maybe the Funkfeuer guys will expand the network down into the U-Bahn, so that'll be cool. But anyway, so that just and I think that kind of, for me, this is what I really wanted to show in the book was to kind of talk about some of the cool tech projects that are happening in other parts of the world to help people, not just in the U.S. but in other parts of the world, understand them and learn from them, and maybe make them useful in other places. And yeah, so because I feel like a lot of times we get too focused in the tech community, especially the American tech community. I am sometimes guilty of this myself, so I apologize. That we think that Apple and Google and Facebook are it. That those are the only cool things that are happening on the internet. And I'm here to tell you, there is cool stuff happening right here in Austria. There is the Funkfeuer project. I think is awesome. There is also, I'm really excited about this guy that you've probably all read about, this guy Max Schrems, who's taking on Facebook in Ireland. That's totally cool. I wish him the best of luck. I've been following that. If he's successful in what he's doing with getting people to get their data from Facebook, I think that will set a really big precedent, not just for Austria and Ireland, for the rest of Europe. But here's the really interesting thing about that whole case. Which is that, I don't know if you realize this, but so Facebook, their international headquarters are in Ireland, right? And so therefore they're bound by European Union law, right? European Union data protection law. If you sign up for Facebook and you don't live in the US or Canada, you sign a contract with Facebook Ireland. Right? So if you live in Iran or Brazil or South Africa or anywhere else in the world, you're signing a contract. When you sign up for Facebook, the terms of service, it says Facebook Ireland at the bottom, if you bother to read that far. That's what it says. So that means, conceivably, that the Data Protection Authority in Ireland is, in effect, the Data Protection Authority for the world for Facebook. Right? So conceivably, if Max Schrems is successful, people in Brazil or in China or in any other country except the US and Canada could go to Ireland and say, hey, we want to, file a complaint against Facebook. That's really interesting. And I think it's awesome that this smart young kid from Vienna figured this out. Because I wouldn't have figured it out, but I'm glad that he did. So, kudos to Vienna and Austria and smart, geeky law students. So I think I will pause here for a moment and open things up.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you guys. So fire away if you have questions, comments, anything, ruminations?
Anyone would like to start?
No questions at all. How many people are going to the ACTA protest tomorrow? A few people, okay.
I have to.
You have to? All right. Yeah, I think that's been really fascinating to watch too. And I was excited that, I was mentioning to some people earlier, when I came in, I took the CAT train from the airport downtown to Wien Mitte. And on the CAT train, they have, the TVs with like the news and the advertisements and stuff. And they had a little thing about like, ACTA protest in, I forget the name of the plots that's happening tomorrow. So I was like, yeah, that's cool. So anyway.
But they said today that Germany will not sign it.
I know, that's great. They hadn't signed it, had they? But I don't even think they had committed to signing it before, had they? Had they said they were going to sign it?
But you live in Germany.
No, I know. But you guys speak German a lot better than I do, so you could tell me. But yes, Germany said they're not going to. I think Poland, Czech Republic, Romania, Slovakia. What did Austria sign it?
Austria signed it.
You did sign it. Are they? Do you think anything's going to happen? Political pressure? No?
Everybody takes the responsibility for that.
Yeah, well, the thing is that, of course, ACTA doesn't take effect, you might know this, ACTA doesn't take effect until 6 countries have ratified ACTA, right? So the US has signed it, and, Mexico and all these other, Austria and all these other countries have signed it, but then they have to pass it, they have to ratify it in the parliaments, right? Or in the, American government. So for now, we're okay, but hopefully, for now.
Do you have a feeling for if it will be ratified in these states?
In the US, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's really interesting, and I think that we're entering a period now where we've had these incidences. I mean, well, first of all, you saw what happened with SOPA and PIPA, right? I mean, you saw that got shot down real fast. So that gives me a little bit of hope, However,
there is something that most people don't know about SOPA and PIPA.
Yeah.
Is that some of the folks from the intelligence agencies were actually saying that if you have these DNS blocking is in effect for SOPA and PIPA, actually our whole protocol DNS sec, which we're trying to deploy, won't work anymore. The internet will be less secure. So actually, they even have the intelligence services against these laws, which is really, very convincing.
Yeah. Well, it's I mean, I think I write about this stuff for a living. I'm a technology journalist, and probably a lot of you work in technology and read about it or are interested in it. Obviously, that's why you're here. Hope. But for me, I think it's a really interesting time legislatively because of some of these bills, SOPA, PIPA, ACTA, and then we saw what happened in the mega upload case. The American government, has taken, unfortunately, I think, a very aggressive stance on that, and is, pursuing these kinds of things. But I think it's very interesting to see what's happening here in Europe with people like Max Schrems, with these active protests, with also the Pirate Party that's been, slowly gaining a little bit of traction. How's the Pirate Party doing here in Austria? How are you guys doing?
Do we have any?
Do we?
Yeah, I think they, I don't know, split up or something like that.
There's two
Yeah.
Fireburn? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So like, is that like a resource fork? Is that like a?
Major conflicts.
Oh,
I guess.
okay. All right. Well, figure it out. But you know, it's exciting to see that, you know, there's two. You probably know there's two Swedish pirates in the European Parliament, so that's good. And in Berlin they just got, what was it, 10, 11, 12 seats, something like that. And you know, in the upcoming German elections, there's looking like maybe they'll get a few more, so that could be interesting. But you know, I think that there's slowly, I think, you know, that people are becoming more sensitized to these types of issues. So I think that's a positive thing. So, any other questions? Anything?
I was wondering, like in synagogues, did you see lots of internet cafes?
I did. Well, so Senegal is interesting.
Access for the average citizen?
Yeah, for the average person. In a place like, thank you. In a place like Senegal, so you have, and I think this is probably true in many parts of the developing world, is that there's a big disparity between the big city and the rest of the country. So, and the Senegalese government actually released a study about this a couple of years ago, and it showed that something like 80% of the people that are on the internet live in the capital, you know, so there's a big difference in that way. But if you go to the capital city, Dakar, you know, you can't, in many places, it's hard to walk more than 200 meters before you find another internet cafe. So they're all over the place. And, you know, some of them, and they're pretty cheap. They're maybe, I don't know, 40 cents, 50 cents per hour. So a lot of people will go, and you'll see groups of young boys or young kids. Sometimes they'll, you know, each put in, you know, 10 cents or something, and they'll all gather around and they'll watch like YouTube videos for an hour or something, you know, like you'll see that. Or I was in a cyber cafe once, so you've probably all gotten the like, I am an African prince, please send me $10 million, like you've probably all seen these emails. I actually saw a guy in a cafe actually sending these emails. This is really true. I swear this is true. And I could not believe it. I really could not believe it. Because this guy was paying, you know, I presume that for him, you know, spending €1 or half a euro on internet access means more to him than it does to me. And this is what he was spending his time on, was sending these scam emails. Like, it's amazing. But, you know, obviously it works because they keep going. So somebody is stupid enough to, you know, follow that or whatever. But yeah, so to answer your question, in the kind of city areas, you do find internet cafes. You do find a little bit of Wi-Fi. It's getting better, but not so much in the outer parts of the country. So, yeah. You guys are a quiet crowd. Maybe it's the cold.
One interesting point.
Please.
We already discussed about e-voting in Estonia, and in Austria we fighted against e-voting for a long period of time, and they forced the people to do e-voting.
Yeah.
So they have tents on the countryside to put everybody in, and all the old people are put to the computers. And
Well, that's really interesting because that you say that, because I think for me, living in Germany, and you can tell me if this kind of feeling extends into Austria as well, I'm not sure. But Germany, as I'm sure you all know, is a country that is very much concerned with privacy and very much concerned with data protection, right? And there's a real culture of data protection that does not exist in my home country, in the US, you know. And I think that is something that I try to, you know, if I were to add, you know, if I were to add Germany to this book, a lot of it I think would be about this exact idea, and kind of trying to understand where these values come from and what is it about German history and German society that produces this reaction, right? That's kind of what I'm trying to talk about here, is that it's not so much that the internet does something, right? It's more that we do things to the internet, right? It's more that we created it. It's something artificial. It's not a force of nature. And so there's a reason why you get Skype in Estonia and gaming in Korea and, you know, other kinds of things in other kinds of places. And so you mentioned in e-voting in Estonia, and that in Austria, so in Austria it was, they wanted it to be required, mandatory? No.
They did the first starting test
Okay.
at votings for the University of the Students Committee, and a lot of student organizations argued against that.
Okay.
And we did that too.
And so they stopped, so it's stopped now?
There was different resistance from the whole society.
Oh, okay.
We really fucked them. So nothing left of everything they did. It was all illegal, so not all illegal. E-voting is essentially like, the average citizen versus e-voting is like going to a magician show.
Yeah.
There's a box, the e-voting box. It goes like magic, and now your vote counts.
Yeah.
So how do I check it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good point, and maybe I think, yeah, and I think that maybe that's part of, because Estonia is this young new country that is willing to kind of dive into these things, maybe they're more receptive to those kinds of ideas. I think in the U.S. we haven't gone quite to e-voting yet, but we've had in some states, my home state of California. Well, voting in the U.S. is just fucked up to begin with, but as you probably saw from you guys remember the Chads from 10 years ago from Bush Gore and the paper and those weird guys holding up the things? You probably remember that. Anyway, but so we have systems where in some states you have a computer screen, and so you just like press and you're like, okay, I want to vote for this person and this person. My home state had computer voting. They certified it, and then like 2 years later they decertified it, so they pulled it away, and now we have gone back to the paper voting. So that sort of thing. And I think in the U.S. there's a lot of the same kinds of questions, right? That like, how do we know that this is correct? How do we verify it? So the U.S. probably won't be doing, certainly won't be doing internet voting anytime soon.
And is Estonia feel secure doing that?
They've done it, yeah. They've done it for. They haven't had any problems. The way that it's been written into the Estonian law is that you have a period of, I believe it's 72 hours to vote on the internet, and you do it with your digital ID card. So you have a card reader, you pop it into your computer, and you get, just like how probably you all use with your bank, right? So you log into your bank's website. In the same way in Estonia, you have access to a citizens portal. And so you just says, hi, Daniel, what would you like to do? Do you want to vote? Do you want to pay your taxes? Like, do you want to check any government service that you can think of, you can interact with through this website. And that's how, and it's done through this kind of private key, public key system using this digital ID card. But so when the election happens, they say, okay, 3 days you can vote. And then, so let's say Monday to Wednesday, you can vote online, and then the actual physical election happens on Saturday or Sunday or something like that. And they've written it into the law that the government has the power to, or the election authority has the power to, if for whatever reason they don't trust the internet results, if they think that they've been attacked or corrupted or something, the government has the authority to say, okay, we're going to cancel that, and then that gives enough time to give people the opportunity to go and physically vote later on. And you're not required to vote by internet. You don't have to. You have the option. And I think as of now, I think only less than 10% of the people have actually done that in national elections. But so far, they seem to be okay with it. So I don't know.
I think there is also an interesting duality here. Like, you have a highly developed country like Estonia. Again, that was the first one to be attacked. I hate the word cyber war.
Yeah.
But it happened to them in a sense. They got beat lost by just someone. So it's like interesting to see the duality at the same time.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that Estonia was trying to kind of come to grips with when that happened. So this was after in 2007. You probably know there was and I write about this in the book also. There was a Soviet statue that the Estonian government wanted to move from a park that was in the center of the city, and they wanted to move it to a different park outside of the city. and some ethnic Russians in Estonia got very upset and started protesting and rioting, and actually somebody got killed. This was over a period of 2 nights. And then after they finally moved it, there was, as you said, there was this sustained for 2 weeks down to the minute, midnight Moscow time, 2 weeks of DDoS attacks against Estonian government, financial, and media websites that were bombarded with fake, DDoS traffic, basically. And for a country that depends on not only government services and especially internet banking, this was a big wake-up call, I think, to a lot of people. And in some ways, you could argue that Estonia, kind of in the world's eyes, has kind of gone up a bit, because if people have heard of Estonia at all for technology things, they've heard of it because of Skype, or they've heard of it because of this exact attack and kind of the prowess that they've shown to defend themselves and things like that. And NATO, I know Austria is not a member of NATO, you guys are neutral, I get it, neutral. Estonia, so NATO has these things called centers of excellence in different, they're like these military think tanks. So I think there's one in like Sweden or Finland that's like Arctic warfare, cold weather warfare. And then there's another one in Turkey that's on like counterterrorism warfare, stuff like that. So they set up one in Estonia, a center of excellence of cyber defense. So they bring these guys from all over the world and they look at these things and have these kind of cyber war games and develop policy. And they have a big international, they've now had 3 or 4 international cyber defense conferences that are held in Estonia. And so I think Estonia is kind of coming up in the world because of that, and because of all that attention that came from this attack a few years ago. So.
Have you?
Yeah, please.
Have you also looked, when you looked at these different countries, how the internet influences the income situation?
That's a hard one. The influence of the income situation. I don't know in these particular countries how much, I think you can say that there's a general correlation between higher levels of income and higher levels of internet. But I don't know how much I don't know how much causality there is, do you know what I mean? There is a really interesting story that was in Wired magazine, I want to say like a year and a half ago, that talked about a small town in Romania, the town of Râmnicu Vâlcea, for those of you who know your Romanian geography. And it's this story, it's this Scamville, right? So they called it Hackerville or Scamville. And basically there's this small town in Romania that had basically, as far as I could tell, has been kind of developed or taken over or funded by Romanians who do all kinds of internet scams. Who they do kind of their own variation on the "I'm an African prince, send me 10 million euros." So the one that they do, a common one is they'll say like, so they'll write in English on like Craigslist in the U.S., right? And so they'll say like, "I'm an American soldier in Germany. I have a Jeep or I have a car that I'm trying to sell because I'm going to be sent to Afghanistan next week, and I'm trying to sell my car really fast. And I will send you the car to the U.S. from Germany. You don't have to pay for anything, but you just have to like pay for the port fees or whatever, the $500 or $200 or whatever. And then if you don't want it, you can send it back and it's fine. And of course, then some people say, they're like, okay, I want to buy a truck for $2,000, some insanely cheap price. And then they go and they pay the however much money they're supposed to pay, and then there's no car. And so in this town, there, like in this article, if you look it up, I believe the article is called like "Welcome to Hackerville" or something like that in Wired. And it's the opening scene in this article talks about how there's like a Mercedes dealership in this town that really should not have a Mercedes dealership. That that a few people have just made way too much money from doing these kinds of scams. So I don't know if that's quite what you meant, but but So there's something that's going on there.
For me, more interesting would be or also interesting would be like the global political question, will there be one internet, or do you think it's already or a lot of small? We didn't talk a lot about Iran.
Yeah.
Is it more like internet or Iranian internet, and how do you see the global situation on this, apart from this, for example?
Well, I think already we have a fragmented internet, right? The internet that we experience in Austria or in Europe, in this part of Europe anyway, is different than the internet that people experience in Iran or in China, simply because of websites being blocked, services being blocked, and people being genuinely afraid for what they post and do and say online, right? I mean, in a country like Iran, where people get arrested for starting websites or using websites or posting things online, getting arrested or intimidated or forced into exile. A lot of the people that I wrote about in the book, in the Iranian chapter, grew up in Iran or are Iranians, but now many of them have been essentially forced out of the country and probably could never go back. They now live in the UK or in Canada or in the US. And that's a very real situation, and so I would say that's something that we need to think about as my own government, the US, as probably most of you know, has this internet freedom agenda, this 21st century statecraft agenda, where we're spending, I think it's something like $70 million over 3 years on various projects, including this something called the Internet in a Suitcase project. This idea that people will come with a bag and I imagine this kind of.
Sorry,
no, please.
I have to correct you here. You know about the story about the Internet in a Box scheme?
From the New York Times?
The New York Times journalist was there.
Yeah.
In Sasha, and actually they were just showing how they start to work on things, and there were just a couple of ubiquity devices like the Wi-Fi routers in a box in a suitcase.
Yeah.
And they were just lying around there. It was never intended to bring a suitcase to and then afterwards we were imagining, how the siege would search for the suitcase.
Well, that's what I wonder. That's what I wonder about is, if it does, whether or not there's going to be some kind of secret agent who's going to be parachuted into somewhere. But regardless of, you could imagine, whether it's done by the U.S. government or not, you could imagine a situation where somebody is trying to, expand or create kind of a surreptitious network in a place where they're not supposed to, and especially if they're being funded or assisted or given hardware by a foreign government, particularly a government that's not particularly friendly with Iran right now, like the U.S. You have to ask the question, like, what happens when that person gets caught, right? What happens when that person gets found out and there's a kind of, made in America, like big sticker on it. Obviously they wouldn't do that, but, metaphoric sticker. What does that mean? And how far are we as people who want a free internet, as people who want to support that, how far are we willing to go politically, to what ends are we willing to support that? I don't know. This is a very tough question.
Yeah. But I think you gave the answer already, that especially for Iran.
Yeah.
There are lots of very educated technicians there.
Yeah.
And if they want to build a network, I'm sure they get the devices there. It's just standard Wi-Fi devices and just Linux and just do it. And do it as a gaming network.
We talked about that. We talked about that.
So it's there, it's in their hands, and just multiple things.
Yeah, no, I think that there's lots of cool, there's lots of cool projects that I think we all want more people to have more free access, and people will figure it out, I think, one way or the other, slower or faster in some places, but I think it's clear that this is becoming an increasingly part of the internet, of the kind of international political agenda, not just in the U.S., but the government of the Netherlands has also said that they're putting money forward for similar types of projects. There was a big conference in London that was held a few months ago, bringing together leaders from all over Europe and all over the world to talk about how we're going to stand up for internet rights and things like that. But as you said, also there's kind of a disconnect. I was speaking with another researcher that some of you may know, a guy called Chris Segoyan in the U.S., and he was saying, look, there's a big disconnect between what the U.S. government on the one hand, they want to pass all these kind of very restrictive laws that make it difficult for you to do things to your mobile phone, to install things that would be useful to you on the one hand, but then on the other hand they want to support freedom activists and all this other kind of thing, and those things don't always really connect with each other, to coin a phrase. So I
think I still want to comment on what you said. I think Egypt was always just a network of networks. So in the sense where some people in some countries in Central Asia experience it quite often, that Egypt means you get a login on the HTTP proxy and you just get 4 outgoing, that's it. That's the internet,
Yeah. I mean, in Cuba, whoa. Oh,
Wenigstens wahr.
just blew out this guy's eardrum because he poured water in front of the mic.
He makes not radio, so
What's that?
he's not the top technical.
Oh. Watch out next time. Oh my god. Anyway, I think, is that anything else that we want to cover? I don't think we're going to solve all these problems tonight.
No, the only question, you mentioned ACTA, and all the laws we are encountering now are that the global internet has to be divided into little pieces so that we get an Austrian internet where the Austrian law can enforce their law, and we get an American internet where the American can enforce their. Is it the only way that the internet can survive to become a national internet, or will we have a liberal internet on top of it? And not only the technicians who can do it by themselves.
Well, I think that, it seems like this is where the kind of, in English we say where kind of the rubber meets the road, but this is where kind of the law meets the tech, how do you deal with a borderless technology in a bordered world, right? And this is something that we're trying to sort out.
Border.
What's that?
Change the borders.
Change the borders? Yeah, that's...
Rip them.
Well, you've done it to a degree. You've done that in the European Union, right? And for those of you who try to buy things on the internet in Europe, you know that it's a lot easier to cross physical borders than it is to cross digital borders here now, right? So not all and this has to do with law, right? The reason why iTunes or any other internet service can't sell the same thing in all the countries of the European Union is because there's different copyright laws and different intellectual property laws in the 27 member states, right? And so that's hopefully trying to get sorted out. I don't know if that fully answers what you're saying. I don't know that I have a good answer.
I think there is no answer.
Yeah.
In the end.
Yeah.
Okay, any...
Well, thank you guys for sharing your evening with me. As I said, there's books for sale. They're €20, and best of luck to you all.
Thank you for coming to
Thank
Vienna.
you.